and kind of talk about what I'm doing currently with sibling groups, or just helping support parents. So again, my name is Patric Barbieri. I just retired in June. I was at Lab Collaborative for 32 years. I retired as the executive director. I went to business school, and came out, thought I would have a part-time job working at Lab, and had worked, at a lot of camps and things like that for special needs. So I did it part-time, absolutely loved it, went back to school, became a teacher, and slowly started to, as I taught, got opportunities to work in administration. Then 32 years later, I retired as executive director. So, it was a tough time to retire in the sense that, it was emotional, but at that time, kind of everything was back at the end of June. There were no masks, everybody was going back to school. And I felt like, Lab was in such a good position. They were healthy. And I thought, it was just a good time to kind of move on. I always say to people, if you retire on a positive note, the way you look back at life is so much better. So I still keep in touch with everybody. But again, my experience at Lab really kind of shaped my life in so many different ways, and some of it that I will share here. I retired still with a lot of energy to keep on going and doing stuff. So I'm doing, program consultations for districts here and there. That's another passion of mine. But most importantly, I'm one of the co-directors of ForeverParent. And I'll talk a little bit about that after I kind of go through this. But that has really kept me busy as well, and something, again, that I'm passionate about. So most of the people here I don't know, but I should also say, I'm a sibling, and I'm a guardian of my sister, Michelle. She has Down syndrome, and she's 45 years old. It's unbelievable how, when I say how old she is, it's just incredible how fast that went by. But Michelle lives in a residence, a Till residence in Lexington, and she does great there. Of course, she thinks she's the boss of the house. I have to explain to her she's, a housemate. She's not staff there, but it's such a great group of kids. They all went to Lab, and she's grown so much since being in the house. So she also works part-time at TJ Maxx. She's actually been there for about 15 years. She went through about 10 jobs, my parents really trying to advocate for her different types of jobs. And finally, this was really, I don't know if anybody remembers DeSells in Lexington. It was this retail store, and she worked there, and it was awesome. I mean, she just, the community, growing up in Lexington, they all knew her, and they closed. And it was so unfortunate because it just was, such a great match for her. Talking about natural supports, that it couldn't be any better there. But since then, she had many jobs, and she finally landed at TJ Maxx. As I said, she's been there 15 years. I want to give a shout out to TJ Maxx, because even when I was at Lab, we worked with them as well. I can't tell you the amount of work that they do with special needs, students with special needs, is incredible. The patience that they have. I'm in contact with them a lot. If the ride doesn't show up, they call me. If Michelle gets in trouble, they call me. If something happens, they'll call. It's just a good relationship that we have. So it's a philosophy of their organization. And there's others, but just tremendous. Michelle's hours kind of, they go up and down depending on the year. But I have to say, this last holiday season, she worked quite a bit, which was great. Then they kind of slow it down. Now she's going back. Great organization. I want to show you a picture of Michelle. I just think, when I talk about somebody, it's important that you kind of see a name in the face. So let me just do this quickly. I'm going to share my screen with everybody here. Okay, this should work here. So here's Michelle. Anybody see that? That's her at the Special Needs Art Network, and she loves art. She just does a great job there. So they put all the art up in the banks now. She has some displayed out there in Lexington Center, so it's just a great thing. Okay, let me get out of this. And here's another picture that I just love that I show to people. That so this is Michelle in the middle, and on the left here in the light gray is a friend of hers that we've known the family ever since the kids were born. And they've been friends for, all this time, 45 years. It's amazing, still talk to the mother. She's great. And the person to the right of Michelle in the dark gray is actually her housemate. So what I know about this picture, why I like it so much, is because the way that her friend on the left here is laughing and the way her housemate has her lips together, Michelle's doing something that is probably, not inappropriate, but probably something that she's not supposed to be doing. And I see Michelle's kind of smirk on her face, and therefore she's up to something. But I love looking at this picture. It's just one of those good feeling pictures. So just wanted to show you that, so you kind of got a face with my sister. Being retired, I sometimes forget, the days, once in a while, they say I'm an organized person. Every so often I'll be like, oh, what day is it? But I received an email from Michelle's counselor today, and I said, yeah, today's Tuesday. They meet today. They probably met around 11 o'clock. I got the email about 1. And usually we check in. Michelle knows that Jenna and I speak, and we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Michelle's also a person who is just savvy enough to be on social media that we really have to monitor her. So that's my wife's job. We all have different jobs in the family. So my wife monitors the social media. And just to give you an example, it was, 3 days ago, I heard my wife coming down the stairs, Pat, Michelle's on Facebook. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's okay. She goes, no, she posted your phone number on Facebook. I'm like, what? So, I have to call the residents, and I talk to her, and she's denying it. And then she hangs up on me. Then I call her back, and she hangs up on me again. So I call my sister, and like, Charlene, you got to call the house, get my number down off of Facebook. And it's I'm going to be 58 years old. Michelle's 45. We're still brothers and sisters. We fight like we did when we were younger, and the natural things that happen just still happen today, and that'll never go away. And I'm so glad that they don't either, because it's just part of the process. We just have a lot more people and family being involved and trying to help her. So again, I wanted just to give you a little bit of background about being a sibling and kind of being involved in her family, be involved in her life. In lab, we did a lot of talk about, approaching, age 22 and people, the students graduating, moving on. And, we served, from students from 3 to 22. And most of our talk about the special needs planning was getting ready for that. We had parent nights quite a bit, and we did kind of the basics of special needs planning, with trust and guardianship and things like that. And when I look back and at that time, I always say, I wish we did it better. And the reason I say that, or the reason that I look back and reflect, because when I had my family experience, which I'll kind of talk about, it doesn't click in. And last 5 or 6 years that I was at Lab, I kind of took a whole different approach to what we call special needs planning, and kind of what that meant, being part of a family who kind of went through a lot. I also want to mention, we had alumni dances, and we started having them twice a year. And we had over 250 students that would come. It was amazing. It was such a wonderful night when especially if you had an organization for a long time. In the later years, you saw the students growing older, and they're adults, and all the changes that they go through. You really look forward to seeing them. We had graduates who graduated in the late 80s coming. And I got into a routine of going to these alumni dances, and we had wonderful dinner, and I would go to every table, and I would ask the students the same questions. I would ask them where they're working, where they're living, and what are they doing socially. And for me, it was a way to get data from my sister and kind of when she got older, what she would be doing. So it became my routine and I would write it down and I would talk to staff. But ultimately, I would talk to them about their parents and say, hey, how are your parents doing? How's, and, I started hearing, oh, my parents passed away or a parent passed away. And that would kind of hit me hard, because you start to put this into perspective. But what I thought about the most when they would told me about this was, who's taking care of them now? Who's doing the work that their parents did? If they're in a living situation, they're fairly independent, great, and they're getting along, wonderful. But it was always on my mind. And even all the staff, we talked about it all the time because we had so many social events. This was really the only time that we saw our graduates. So it's something that had a really big impact on me, as I started getting my later years at Lab. And even today, I never thought that I would be where I am in my sister's life. And now I'm making the decisions for her like my parents did. And, growing up in our family, we had some really like hardcore talks between my mom and dad. They were opposite in their philosophy in growing up. And of course, now here I am in special educations, for instance. My father wanted my sister to have, the traditional academics growing up, what everybody else learned, my sister should be learning. My mother was always, she should have the functional life skills academics. And I was always in the middle of this and, Pat, what do you think? And what do you think we should do? And always trying to get sides, but it was really good, healthy dialogue. It got heated every so often, but that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to talk these things out. Another one was when my sister had an opportunity to live on her own. And this was when she's in her early 30s and she had an opening came up in one of the Till houses in Lexington. And I can still remember that day like it was yesterday because my mom called me and said, I could believe this. This is incredible. But the way my father saw it was like, nope, she's not going to move anywhere. I'm going to take care of her for the rest of my life. There's nobody else that can keep her as safe as we can. And my mom was like, absolutely, she's moving to the house. There's no question about it. So we got through that. My mom won that one. Thank goodness. It was the best decision that we could have ever made. Certainly an emotional one at that time, but it just couldn't have been a better place, for my sister. Then in 2016, both my parents got sick. They both had cancer and they passed away within 5 months of each other. So it was quite obviously an emotional time for us, just, trying to take care of my sister and, making sure she was all right, but at the same time, taking care of my parents. And when they passed, I became guardian of my sister. While they were sick, I certainly told my parents, you don't need to worry. I got this. Just don't worry about it. And although that we were, a close family and we got together quite a bit, I certainly wasn't prepared at that time because I had no information, to be guardian. It wasn't, we didn't really, share everything that my parents were doing for my sister, especially at that time. I wish I was a bit more mindful about what I needed to be prepared for or about what my parents known while they were going through, what they were going through. And although my sister is fairly healthy, she has a lot of doctor's appointments, just small things, just to kind of as preventative care, dentists, a primary doctor. She has a foot doctor, her ear doctor. She had a nutritionist that she worked with. And although I knew a little bit about it, I really didn't know where they were. I knew my parents went into BU for the dentist. They were retired, so they would go in there to the medical school there, and they would take Michelle with her. But I didn't know any of the details. It wasn't like they had any of this written down for me. One of the things that I first remember, I was trying to get some of her things organized, and all of a sudden her SSI payment stopped. And somebody called me and says, Michelle's payments aren't going through. And I think this is for a home. And I said, what do you mean? What's going on? That's automatically taken out from the bank. And they said, no, our SSI payments stopped. And I couldn't figure out why. And I'm making all these calls, and come to find out that I didn't fill out the Mass Health forms. That's tied to SSI. And all of a sudden it came to me. So we had to go down to, the SSI department and Social Security and kind of take care of that. I also thought about how many workshops that I went to that we had at Lab, and I sat in all of them, about guardianship. And I said, well, how come I didn't think about being co-guardian of my sister at that time? Maybe it was just kind of the stress of it all. But it would have been so much of a better place if I had been co-guardian. Because as going to the doctors and anywhere that I needed to get in touch with somebody, they couldn't talk to me. They had to talk directly to Michelle. So Michelle and I would have to make these phone calls together, and sometimes she would allow them to talk to me, and sometimes she would say to them, I'm going to think about it. And I'd be next to her like, Michelle, just and we would kind of go through this routine over and over. I remember one time it was taking forever. I forget who it was. But I had to get Michelle on the other side of the phone in her house while I was home. And we magically got through to them, gave them the number. We must have been on the phone for half an hour just for Michelle. She was asking them all sorts of questions. And it's funny when I look back now, but it was really, really frustrating at the time, because it could have just been so easy for me to get the information, and especially from her doctor, which was wonderful. And the people were doing what they're supposed to do. They're protecting the rights, and that's really important. So I wasn't mad at them. I was just frustrated that I wasn't able to do this. And here I am, the executive director of Lab for all these years, and leading an organization of whatever, 400 students and I'm struggling, in all of this experience that, we don't talk about, at that 3 to 22. Anyways, those kind of things that are, experiences that I went through, I wish that, my parents had talked to me or gave me all the information that they had slowly as we went along. She was in a great residence, but it was just so much they did. And even some of that, I talk to so many parents now, and and I know sometimes it's like, I don't want to burden the siblings or, give them all that information. They're in a time of life they're trying to, get going. And I always thought, maybe my parents, looked at it the same way, and they didn't want to burden us, but we were involved. But what I can say now is that if anybody doesn't want to burden somebody, it's like, well, keeping the information or not getting somebody involved. If those parents out there trying to get all this information, is just incredibly frustrating. And it took me probably a year to get everything. Even today, I wish I had her Facebook password and username, because I would have been able to take my phone number right off of that right away. But these are the things that you just don't think about. How many, I couldn't believe all the work my parents did. It gave me a whole new appreciation. But what I did out of this, and I talk to parents all the time, I just called it a task list. And I just got a Google spreadsheet, and I put the categories in, and I just started filling things in. So like today, if I wasn't here and somebody needed information, they would know every single thing about my sister, everything that she did, every phone number, address, important person, you name it. If you want that, I'll share it with you. These all the categories, but it's just amazing when a piece of data comes by. You're like, oh, I got to put that. And I shared that with my with my brothers and sisters, they all have it now. And if something gets updated, we say, oh, we got to put it in the task list. So we put it in there. So it's an ongoing, information, her CPAP machine, which is such an important part of her health. I monitor all that on my phone, all her supplies and how they're ordered and how it's taken care of. It's just routine. And to keep that going, all somebody would need to do is, look in that task list, and they would know what to do, especially, her medications. And it's such an important thing. I had a tough time kind of going through her medications and understanding the whys. So I had to call, the doctors, and they were very helpful, telling me why, how long, the history of it. Just didn't know it all. But anyways, yeah, I know a couple of people saying that they would like to see it. I'll definitely send that to Emily, and she can shoot it out to you. You can take a look at that. Some people said, that I've talked to, oh yeah, I have it. That's something that I do. And I saw it had some of the main categories, and then they took mine and they kind of juxtaposed them together and put them together. And they said, oh, I didn't realize about this. So all my rep payee stuff, all the numbers are there. So after going through all of this, I said, I have to share this. I just went through an experience that, when we go to parent groups, or I'm writing in the lab newsletter, or I'm doing whatever as my role as a resource to parents. And, I always thought about the skills that were given our students vocationally and socially. After I went through it, I said, how do I communicate this in my role as director? Because we always talk about lab for life. That's kind of like a thing that we used to say. And the reason we said it is because of our alumni group. Our alumni always have a connection to lab. But it had a different meaning to me when I went through this with my life. Lab for life now meant something totally different. Still the same components, but there was so much more to that, and what parents need to know, at least be exposed to. So I remember I wrote this long article, spent a lot of time writing all the experiences that I went through, and I try to write it in a concise format, a little bit longer, or a lot longer than I typically write for a newsletter. And I put it out. I put it out to all the parents. And I couldn't believe the impact that it had. I just thought it would be another article. But the amount of calls that I got, not just from the parents in lab, but outside of lab, really kind of made sense to a lot of people. And I was so glad that parents were reached out. We started to, as I said, in my last 6 years, this is when it started to, when I did this, parents were talking about how they were facilitating discussions with their siblings, and they were talking to extended family. They were starting to get more into the special needs planning. It was a wake-up call for others, but everybody's in different phases of life. So out of that, where I was doing a lot of talks at that time, so then I decided to do a podcast. And I wanted to somehow put it into a place where, when I wasn't there, people could go back and listen to it. So I had the idea to do a podcast. I called it the reality and brutally honest truth about special needs planning. I know it's kind of an interesting name, but the reason I named it that, and that wasn't actually the name of the article, was because I wanted it to have an impact. I wanted to say how important this is. We can't always wait. We have to kind of do something, even as small, all along the way. I had a blast with the podcast. It was something, if you go to the lab webpage, it's up there and you can see some of the discussions, but I took all components of things that I felt that parents should know and just kind of talk to people about it. Many of the conversations I had with people, and I said, I need to do this as a podcast. So just wanted something that would be there for people who could, the realities of post 22, but family planning as well. Also, I put together an alumni group. That's kind of one of the first things that I knew so many parents that were struggling. I knew a lot of them were at a phase where they were thinking about housing, but didn't know what to do, or they were just getting used to the post 22 world. And when I got this alumni group together, it was, I read your article, I read this, somebody sent it to me, and it kind of was the impetus of starting our conversations. And we had the same conversations that I had talked about in the article, but I was amazed about how many the parents were starting to look into housing where they wouldn't look at it before, or they were looking at other things, or starting to plan or have discussions with their family. And they were incredible meetings. They were emotional many times. And out of that group, it just started to expand and expand. And I really felt at that time, the work that I was doing was even more, my role as executive director expanded, and I wish I had known that, a while before that, but it was still helpful even at that time. Emily, I know there's some questions going on there. Do you want me to answer some of them now, or do you want to wait?
I think I just checked. I think most of it is just that people definitely want the task list.
Okay.
And just clarification on lab and where the podcast to be accessed.
Okay. Yeah, if you go to LABB.com, you can get it there. LAB is a collaborative, stands for Lexington, Arlington, Bedford, Burlington, and Belmont. And those districts got together back in 1974 when the law passed that districts could collaborate around different services. LAB happened to be, mission was on special needs planning from ages 3 to 22. Each collaborative has kind of a different philosophy. So, but if you go to the website, it will certainly show that if you also go to the newsletter section of the web page, on the newsletters that get sent out, they still have my podcast on there, so you can find it that way. But we'll make sure you get that. But yeah, I see the task list. I'll send you that as well. Okay. So when I started meeting with all these groups, I found myself asking the same questions over and over and over. And these questions were such as, have you had discussions with other family members about your sibling, or just the parents having a family discussion with all siblings? They don't have siblings, I get it, but the idea is having a family discussion, just talking about some of the things that I had outlined in my article. I asked all the time, have you ever had a discussion about who will be the future guardian? I know we all do estate planning. Some of us put it off. Some of us, it really tends, but those kind of discussions about a future guardian, we didn't have as a family. We didn't say like, okay, who's going to take over for Michelle? My parents never had that discussion with us. Was it sort of a tacit understanding? I don't know. What I can say is that, I wish we did. I wish it was something that we kind of talked about a lot. I wish, my parents weren't burdening me about anything, but I wish we had talked about it with all of our siblings. And even with our family, it's kind of, not everybody has the same involvement. All families are different, but I do say, I wish we did. And that's some of the questions that I asked a lot during the alumni groups, especially when somebody new would come in. It was kind of like the first thing that people kind of wanted to know about. Have you discussed this with other people? Who would you consider as a future guardian? That was hard to determine for people. Most times people walked out with a blank, I don't know, and we come back and we discuss it some more. It just wasn't a one-time question. It was something that we talked about all the time. Of course, I was always asking, have you created this task list? And some people say, why? And I said, well, let me tell you what I went through, and what does it look like? When do you start doing it? My answer was always, I think you start now, because some of the details, you just will forget along the way, and just start it. Hey, use this template, add it, share it. I can't tell you how important that's going to be, because I went through that and I wish it was there. Yes, my parents were the guardians for Michelle. So if you went to guardianship talks, you can have co-guardianship and things like that. And but they were both the guardians of my sister. So those three questions, and even during our discussions, I wanted to bring up the tough things that we needed to talk about, because I felt, I'm in a position where I can kind of put this out there, and I think, they want to be part of this group. They're going to listen. They want to learn, but also at the same time, just being sensitive to that, because, I don't want to push anybody. I just wanted to have people be aware of, okay, here's one person going through something. There's others that have gone through, I've done many talks where people have come up to me and said, oh, I'm in the same situation. It's amazing, connecting that way. But they're hard conversations to have, and if I was back at Lab 20 years ago, I would start having those discussions all the time at parent meetings, but I'd probably do it in a way that was kind of gradual build up, and just kind of make it part of our culture and kind of what we help parents get ready for. We were talking about, and we did it a few times. We had some sibling group meetings, and we had many of the staff that worked for us had also had siblings, so we had talked about doing that, and it wasn't something that got off the ground. But we had talked about doing that. I felt it was important. Some of the parents, which I found refreshing when it came out, a lot of the parents were starting to bring the siblings to the parent meetings, and then they would introduce me to them and say, hey, so-and-so's 19, 20, sometimes mid 20s, and I thought they come in and just listen. I thought that was great, and that's kind of sharing stories, I think, opened the door for things that I don't think that would have necessarily happened if I just encouraged it without a personal story that was attached to it. Did you and your siblings agree after your parents passed? Was a level of interest to care for the well-being of was well-being of your sisters? So that's a great question. How do I answer that? So it was clear that I was the guardian. Then what I decided to do was to have my brother be co-guardian, and he agreed to that. That was something that, in case something happened to me or something happened to my brother, we had somebody in there. So had I not gone through it, I wouldn't have thought to do that, but we did that immediately. So I think we're all on the same page in the sense that I take the lead for it. But when it comes to some decisions about my sister, there's one recently that came up about her medication. And I made a decision on what I felt was in the best interest, but there was also a disagreement by another sibling about it. Now, it wasn't really like a dysfunctional, it was just like, well, why? Can you tell me more? And so we talked about it, and it wasn't like I was making a decision just, on the cuff. It really, I kind of thought about it a lot. And my sister, she disagreed, which was fine. And I said, I'm going to move forward with it, but if you've got any other questions, or you want to talk to the doctor, you can certainly do that. But, and again, we just worked it out, and it ended up. There's been a few things like that has happened, but I think there's an understanding that ultimately that I make the final decision. And I'm sure other things will come up. Her trust. I made sure that we know exactly what's going to happen for that, and I had to make some decisions about If the siblings weren't there, meaning my brothers and sisters, what happens next and who would be in charge of it then? We're still trying to work that out. That may not go over so well once the final decision, but it doesn't matter. You have to make a decision. You have to move forward on what you think the right decision is. So for the most part, yeah, I mean, we do agree on the decisions. So that's, before I get into the next part about what I'm kind of doing now and continuing the work from this, just to pause, and I know I threw a lot at you, and like, that happened in maybe an 8-year period, but I continue to tell this story, even to other siblings, that I have friends from high school that had siblings with special needs, and they're seeing what my sister did and asking, well, how'd you do this? And I feel like I'll send them the article, I'll send them the podcast. I said, just listen to some of this, read the article. And they'll call me, I read this, it was great. I sent it to my mother and father, I sent it to my siblings. And it creates a way to communicate even with people that you're not seeing all the time, but maybe that they can kind of get it as a resource, or just have somebody else to say, hey, the Barbieris did this, they seem to work it out. There's lots of problems that happened throughout the years, but for the most part, I think it's been a great resource for me to be able to share with other people. And the more I can, the better. So let me just make sure I got all these questions here before I go on the next part. All right, looks good. My daughter's 21, been involved in every aspect of her care. My other children, while they heard me talk about the various issues. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, she doesn't have to be involved in everything at 21, but just having the knowledge a little bit at a time, not overwhelming anybody. I mean, that's what maybe if I had to look back, we would have done differently with our family. Is just kind of, we always got together. We always, but the talk was never about the planning piece of it, and it doesn't happen all at once. It's just kind of being involved. The one good thing of, the other part about our family that was helpful was like my wife and my brother's wife, and they all wanted the knowledge themselves and be involved. And sometimes you think we would have a meeting, and so I want to go to the meeting, and they go, how come we can't come? Well, no, you can. I didn't know, and so you'd be surprised how much people do want to be involved. Sometimes we assume that they don't, and that's kind of was my point about the task list and having the family conversations, regardless what's going to happen, rather than assume, have the conversation. I want to say one other story that I can share with you. It was probably maybe a year after I had wrote my article. I was at one of the lab dances, and a father came up. He said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I said, yeah. He says, I remember that article you wrote last year. He says, my daughter and her boyfriend were going to move to, I think, California or something. And his daughter got a hold of the article. She read the article. And I didn't mean for this outcome, and I don't necessarily agree with the outcome, but it was an interesting pause. She says, I don't think that we can move out to California right now because I feel like I need to be part of my sister's life. And she ended up moving, but the father and I had a conversation. Like, he wanted her to, it wasn't about that, her having to stay. What he was happy about and that he didn't know was how passionate she was about being part of her sister's life. And that's what, that to me was purposeful from the article, that he was able to say, wow, I just didn't even realize it. He says, we talked and I made sure that she continued to go, because it was a life experience for her. It wasn't, things were fine right now, but it kind of woke him up to the fact that he never had that conversation with his daughter before. He never thought that she would feel that way. And I just thought that that was an important thing that kind of came. And there's a lot of little stories like that that happen, and people wanted to share because it gave them kind of a vehicle to have the conversation. So, all right, let me just check last if there's any questions. I'll kind of get on to the. Okay, so much. All right. So let me talk a little bit about kind of what I'm doing now, and kind of was a positive, unexpected outcome. So when I was, I don't know, maybe 6 months before I retired, I had got asked about being involved in an organization called ForeverParent. And there's two people, Daphne Kraut-Gordon, who's the founder and president of TIL, and Richard Ronder, who is the, he started the Columbus organization, which was the healthcare services for students with special needs and mental illness around the United States. They had got together and had talked about developing this organization. And they started to tell me about it. And, you know, Daphne had read my articles, I actually had her on the podcast. And I started hearing about what they wanted to do. And I thought I would retire and maybe travel a little bit and just shut down the summer and whatever. But I started talking to them a lot about it. And really, this was like an extension of kind of currently, or at the end of my time at Lab, that I was starting to do. So it was certainly something that was needed. So let me talk about what they were talking about at the beginning. ForeverParent was an organization that would work with families to prepare for as parents start to age and caring for their son or daughter with special needs. And kind of what really kind of got me, and I started to reflect on, what was the Lab alumni groups. And when I was asking the questions of like, who's taking care of them and who's doing what the parents did, that's what ForeverParent was. And that's kind of how they explained it to me. And I said, wow, I said, okay, I put those two together. And I said, yeah, I definitely would be interested in being part of that. So I'll just explain a little bit about kind of what makes up ForeverParent and kind of how it works. You know, part of what I've been doing is just talking to a lot of parents about this. And again, this, as I was saying, that you know, there's nobody that said, oh, this is needed. There's no question about it. You know, because I don't think Daphne and Richard decided to do it because they weren't aware of any other kind of organization that was doing this. So really, you know, what we kept on saying and what the kind of the mantra was, and what the question on the parent's mind is, you know, who's gonna, if I'm not here as the parent, who's gonna worry about the things that I did for my son or daughter? Now, in my parents' case, you know, I filled that role, but not all families have that, and maybe not all siblings will take on that role. I'm not saying one is right, one's wrong. Some families are fortunate to have this and others aren't. It's just the fact that was the answer. Who's going to worry when I'm not here? And that's a huge thing for parents. I know that, I definitely know my parents, that was the first on their mind all the time. And although we didn't talk about it all the time, I just knew. So ForeverParent kind of got kicked off during the summer, or last summer. And, you know, we just started to do some webinars. Maybe some of you have gone to them. And really, there's 4 components of ForeverParent, and we're kind of building it as we go. But the first part is a link. And the link is really what I kind of talked about here. It's a way to facilitate a conversation with a family, um, and just have the discussions about everything that I talked about tonight. Um, Emotional discussions, maybe discussions that would be better facilitated by an outside person. Um, I've been doing the links. I'm kind of the person who first does them, even though all the directors could do them. But it's really, that's why this is called family dynamics. That was kind of like the headline of it. That's kind of what a link is. It's really understanding the family dynamics. Everything that the parents do with a child with special needs, family beliefs, where they go out to eat. I mean, everything about kind of how the family functions is a huge part of the link. I also do get into some of the reports and older reports. We're not here to do any more assessments. So many people have had that. But it's really for me to look at it so I really understand the needs of their now adult child with special needs. And there's a lot of other discussions that we have. I talk to the siblings as well. We talk about sibling involvement, or there isn't going to be involvement. It really doesn't matter, just so we understand what the family dynamics are. So we really get into some deep conversation. Ultimately, the outcome of that is for a family to really evaluate or assess their readiness to start the Forever Parent process. And that's really having somebody, kind of an intermediary, be involved. And I kind of would write that up and I would say, no, you don't need Forever Parent. This is not something for you. You have everything. What I heard is in place. This wouldn't be something for you. Or if I said, if you need the services, this is kind of how I would see it, moving along. So that's one aspect of it. It can be done independently or part of all the other services. So Forever Parent has 3 services of, working with a family. They're called Engage, Forever, Partner, and Forever. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but I just want to explain what they are. So the first Engage is that we hire what we call a Forever Parent professional. And a Forever Parent professional is a person that we hire that we really feel is passionate about this work, committed, kind of at an age where they can do this work and they're ready to do it. I think about this like services that we did in lab, or we did home services, and we hired all these direct service providers, and they were wonderful. They really worked with the family. They became, really involved with the family dynamics. And that engaged level is kind of like the knowing part. So, the professional would meet with the family, get to understand. They would do the task list. That's one of the first steps. They would get to know everything about how the family functions, who does what and when. It's really the knowing phase. Now that could take, we just don't know. It's one of those things where, we'd like to start at phase 1 of the engaged level, but we don't know the right timing. I would make some recommendations about it. But maybe 4 hours a week, they would meet with the family, the adult with special needs, spend some time. And that's kind of how I look at the services that we provide at Lab, except this is at a higher level. The second step is when that Forever Parent professional starts to take on responsibilities that the parent actually is doing. Now that will be different for every family. So it could be medical, it could be doing some paperwork, but really as they start to do some of the work that the parent is doing. And that's probably, many parents ask me, when is that done? How is it done? And I said, well, I'll help facilitate all that. But, this has never really been done before. So we're going to find our way through this. But once you start at that right time, you start giving up some of the things, and the Forever Parent professional will start to take those over. The last one is Forever. And that's when the parents actually are not there anymore, the forever parent professional actually takes over and is doing everything that the parents actually did. Now, again, I went through that really fast, and I'm sure there's lots of questions about how that works and costs and all that kind of stuff, and I can send that out. But the service of it, you know, when we talk, you know, it's every parent will say, yeah, this is something that's needed. It doesn't exist, or maybe somebody's trying to start something that's like it. And we're kind of doing it just because of we all have experiences with having siblings or working in the field of special needs and mental illness. And, you know, it was really created to try to, you know, help fill those gaps and create a service that at least we couldn't tell that anything else was being done. So it's new. I wouldn't be involved in something unless I actually thought it was a worthwhile project to get through, and it definitely is. And as anything you start new, you just try to talk to as many people as you can, and you know, try to say it'll be there, and hopefully we'll continue to grow it as we go along. But it definitely was an extension of kind of what I was doing, and you know, and that we all have to face someday. Again, hard conversations to have, but planning for this stuff is not easy, and I know many parents worry about the next step. So that's what I'm doing now. I really hope that it does go somewhere, and I hope that it does fulfill a need. I already know it's gonna, because I've talked to people who are getting ready for these things, and we kind of talk about the how, but you know, we just want to kind of put the word out there. And when I talked to MSSN, you know, I had reached out and, you know, just saying, I know a lot of siblings out there, just maybe if they knew a little bit about this would be something that they could talk about. But certainly my story is the reason that I'm here, and being part of, you know, talking to siblings. I would do that all day long if I could, because I really reconnect in so many different ways. So anything that I can share, you know, I certainly want to be a resource for people, and trying to look at planning in the right way. I learned a lot over the last 32 years, and I figure, you know, I don't want it to stop now, because we're in a different phase of life. So, but that's it. You know, that's really kind of what I wanted to come here to speak about. Let me just see if I get some of these questions. That's good. So forever parent is in lieu of having siblings handling the parent piece, or do they help transitioning siblings? So again, that's a great question too. So again, does a forever parent, instead of having a sibling do the work, does the forever parent? Yeah, that can be, if a family wishes to do that. Maybe a sibling lives across the state, so they want to have a forever parent do it. You know, that's local. That certainly can be done. You know, it's I could go deeper into that, because a lot of the times with the link, you know, I don't want to assume anything. You know, I feel like the link is important to have these discussions, you know, because, you know, you can do that, but, you know, have we had conversations with the siblings? And I know that's going to be hard. What is the situation? There are so many different ones that could happen, but yes, it definitely is that would be the process. You know, it could also be that, you know, a forever parent is doing the work, but the sibling, say the parents end up passing away, that the sibling could oversee it. That could be something that could be worked out. But you know, the forever parent becomes the first call, medical, everything. They decide to be a guardian, we can do that as well. But yeah, we've had many discussions about that very thing, but each family is so different. This is something I've been worried about in so much media. Thank you. I'm going to continue to try to get it out there. There's a requirement that forever parent person to become a professional. Because some family members can start working before they become a guardian. I'm not sure that I understand that. We call it a forever parent, but there's a name that we came up with. Some asked if, the sibling could become the forever parent professional. In that case, we say, no, I mean, certainly will be a resource, but the sibling would do what the forever parent did. I'll share all my stuff that I've learned over the years, but, why hire somebody, if you have somebody that's going to do it? So be like you're paying your own, sibling to do what, the forever parent professional would be doing. So, but again, we're a resource. We would want to tell everything about what we've learned so somebody could be able to do that and do it well. So somebody that, respectfully, how solved is this plan? Is a struggle many times to get responsible, caring, respite help? Yeah, so that's a great question. Even in lab, we people would reach out for respite workers, and many of our staff did it. Obviously, that's a comfort because you know that they're part of lab and they can do that. And what we can say is from the organizations that we all work with, we feel confident that we could find people that are really a good fit for this. I know from lab direct service providers that I would maybe want to recruit for this. And I know same with TILS, that people that would be interested in it. So the one thing that I will say about that is, even if there is a forever parent professional, are they forever? And the answer to that is no. I mean, there'd be many times, again, we'd have a direct service provider that worked with a family for many years with a lab family, and they got really close, and all of a sudden that person either decided to move or do something else. And that was a loss to the family because they became so close. But we had many other providers that had the same training, same knowledge, and they could replace that person and do the exact same thing that the other person was doing. They just had the relationship, and that's always hard to learn. So we're mindful of that. That could certainly happen with this as well. If somebody is there for 10 years and they decide to move or they can't do it anymore, we would want to systematize the training so there just wasn't one person that was trained. There were a couple of people that had the knowledge. We can't just do it. It's unique from family to family, but the understanding of what you do and how you do it, that should be systematized as we grow. Does the forever parent or have resources when needed? Would they need to work with a disabled adults group, home agency? Yes. So yes, they definitely would get. We have so many resources from people that we've worked with. The whole training piece of the forever parent professional would be done by the directors. We have created that, and we've all learned from training, our own staff. So we kind of feel very confident in that. But you're right, you may need something. What would a parent do if you needed clinical advice? The forever parent professional would do the same thing. They would think like the parent would think to be able to get those resources. So if the parents went to a particular agency, well, the forever parent professional, they would go to the same agency as well. They're doing the exact same thing as the parents would do. What else? Anything else that I missed here, Emily? I might have jumped over some, but I think I got them all.
Yeah, I think we're pretty up to date.
Yeah.
If we missed anything, just because the chat's been pretty active, if we missed something that anybody wrote, could you just re-put it in the chat? And we'll see it come up.
Again, I will send that task list. I'll send Forever Parent information to Emily. Forever Parent has a website, foreverparent.com, so you can go right directly to that. On the website, I also, if you see the blog, I had a blog at Lab, and I started one for Forever Parent as well. I just believe that telling family stories and sharing them is the best way for us to get information, to connect with it. It just makes so much sense. So if anybody here is interested in writing an article for the blog, I'd be happy to put it on there, because I'm sure you all have stories and have all unique things differently than what I had. And it doesn't have to be a complete story. I have one person that I really want to write an article, and they said, well, I haven't finished it. I said, no, I think it's better that you haven't, because most people are in flux and most people could be struggling. Start the story there. Then you can write another one that ends it. But just capture what your emotions are and your feelings are now. And I by no means imply that they're bad or negative. It could be very fulfilling and enriching. And, it's a process that, even though it could be emotional, it's still, I think the work feels good. And I think when people connect, it makes it a lot easier. Yeah, if you haven't wanted, you can get in touch with Emily or get in touch with me, whatever. Certainly love to have more articles that I can get. The better is for people like you or anybody out there looking to get a resource.
Patrick, do you want to put your the best contact information for you? Maybe not your cell phone, but
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm gonna type my my email right here, in the chat here. So
in the chat, perfect. Then everybody can have it. I'll include it when we send out the task list and more information about Forever Parent. It'll be in that email as well, but you can grab it off the chat.
That's great. And I welcome anybody to reach out. I mean, again, I'm retired, but I'm busy, but I want to be a resource. And that to me is the best thing. How come this is not going on there, Emily? I'm hitting enter, but it's not going in. Is that? Let me just see if
I don't see it yet. It didn't come through.
So can you type? Why don't you type it?
Yep. Go ahead.
It's Patric, Patric, period. My last name Barbieri @gmail.com.
Okay, great.
That's right. There you go. So feel free to reach out. Again, ForeverParent.com is the website. Up in the right-hand corner, you'll see the blog. And it'll answer a lot of questions, but I think a lot of the questions just need to be talked about one-on-one. I think that's when it really kind of settles and it really makes more sense. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. Amazing.
Thank you so much.
If obviously Patrick's available to everybody, off this call. So please, he's a tremendous resource. So encourage everybody to reach out to him. We really appreciate your time and you being here for us with this group. So thanks everybody for really participating and for the very active chat. So I think that made for a great discussion tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. Really appreciate it. Everyone, thanks so much. Take care. Be in touch anytime.
Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.